So I just watched Freeman as a movie, and I must say I'm rather disappointed. There's a lot to go through. I'll try not to summarize the whole film. I don't even know if it's worth this review, but I might as well get something out of it. So, from the trailers, I was sort of expecting a Truman-esque kind of movie. Now, in all fairness, it's Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds is the most family-friendly actor next to The Rock. He exists for mass entertainment and pleasure. So I guess I kind of walking into it, I should have expected something a little less, I guess, epic. But as far as the movie, even as it goes, it was this disappointment. I think the main problem I had with it is Ryan Reynolds isn't used really effectively at all. Now, I'm not going to act like I'm the biggest Ryan Reynolds fan. I don't particularly watch all his films. But I think his character acting and snarkiness are what make him a hilarious actor. I think that's why he did well in Deadpool, because it's a character where he can be smarmy, annoying, and prickish. His character, Guy, which gets very old and annoying very quickly, is a mediocre, sort of quiet-ish, book-smart character. And it just doesn't suit Ryan's style in the slightest. While he might be a perfect fit visually, he's a shit fit actor wise. It doesn't take advantage of any of his natural dynamic or synergy, which I think is a huge shame for the actor as a whole, and for the movie. But that's just a character analysis standpoint. Let's go down to what made the movie really bad, and I think what it comes down to is it didn't really explore its concept all that well. To compare it to what I was actually going to watch it with was Truman Show, which is with the Truman Show, you've got, characters like, I keep forgetting his name, the actor that played Ace Ventura, right? His energy and acting style are utilized to the most effect in that movie. Whilst also the Truman Show focuses specifically on Truman's desire to leave the Truman Show, to escape the ideal. Here, it feels like they were running with a concept, but didn't really know where to explore it. The whole movie focuses on two main plot threads. Plot thread one being the game designers trying to escape this big corporate tech company, and plot design two, our main character Guy trying to figure out what he wants and if he fits in this virtually simulated world. Let me just say the game design aspect of it was completely horribly written. Firstly, it made no sense. The main villain Antoine is a typical greedy corporate character who uses the money from his company to philanthropize himself while trying to exploit his customer base. While, trust me, I'm no big fan of big video game companies in any capacity, it was so cartoonishly overplayed, I actually genuinely felt sorry for how misaligned some of these big companies are, with the whole idea that, indie developers are just so poor and struggling and just want to make good games. But it's also never explained why Antoine, the main villain, needed their code. The game played like GTA, as in no one really cared about the NPCs, so why they needed to be lifelike in the first place was beyond me. But regardless, he takes the code from their game and then decides he wants to shelf it, creating another plot thread that I'm just thinking about why the game developers couldn't have just gone on to make another game using the same code bank engine as before, since he clearly said he didn't copy it, so they could have just rewritten the code from the ground up and said it was their own. So in that sense, I feel like the movie was already standing on eggshells, especially with the main villain Antoine. But on top of that, the main heroes, Millie and Keys, are also not likable. Keys spends the majority of this movie being a baby and then glorifying over how amazing his AI is, without having to do much except for start a bridge towards the end after raising his middle finger to Antoine. It's a lame sequence at best. Millie gets the most action in this movie, but again, her character is fixated on one very loignant point that she doesn't even get to really fulfill. It seems like this movie was more focused on the spectacle of everything as opposed to how the background story was written. And you can tell this with how great the visual effects of the movie are, but don't overlap with anything intriguing about the story. Millie herself doesn't even get the data required to take down Antoine. It's once again a Guy. Now, that's something I can compliment the movie on. The intertwining of the two plots, despite how widely separate they are, was actually pretty decent. We got to see Guy really cross over and, really care about the other characters. But again, it brings up some ramifications, and this goes down to the second plot, which is Guy's plot. Guy's plot is by far the most confusing, most erratic, and uninteresting plot I've ever seen ever. It didn't make a lot of sense. again, he's an artificial intelligence triggered by the fact that the developer, Keys, was in love with Millie. Sure, but even from the in-game character, he couldn't have told that was Millie in any capacity. Maybe I missed the beginning and didn't see what the trigger was, but it wasn't clearly enough to do that. But the movie spends a large amount of time with Guy trying to figure out his place in the universe, somewhat haphazardly. It's a bizarre sequence to say the least. I can't necessarily fully shit on it. I love the idea of showing his place in the world among YouTube streamers and, Twitch players and all that kind of stuff. Even getting big icons like Pokimane, Jacksepticeye, and other YouTubers to show this. Even Ninja. You see, this would have been great, and it did kind of remind me of Truman Show. In the Truman Show, we got to see a lot of the audience, watching Truman and their spectacle to it. And in the same way, we got that from here, where we got to see the world's reaction to Blue Shirt Guy and his actions and playing more heroically. But the message here was sort of bizarre, because the message the movie seemed to be trying to push is that violence in video games is overly gratuitous and it desensitizes people. But games like Stardew Valley and many other games of a similar nature exist. So the movie's point is kind of mute. These games are designed to have NPCs be killed. This is why GTA is one of the highest selling games ever. It's not that it desensitizes the sympathy. These are just ragdolls code that we're messing with. They don't have sympathy. And the movie could have gone a better way to make its point had it made the AI a bit more interesting. If all of the NPCs are trying to break out the code. But the problem is the NPCs don't really understand it till Ryan Reynolds kind of gets involved. And that's not only till literally the last fifth of the movie. Most of the movie, the NPCs spend in repetitive cycles that don't really affect them. As in, they don't have opinions on it, nor does it bother them. Even Ryan Reynolds' favorite character, Buddy, wasn't bothered by this existentialism. They do try to do a sort of Ryan Reynolds freaks out that his world isn't real thing, but it gets cut down so quickly it's almost not worth talking about. I'm reminded of Truman in The Truman Show and his breakout scene with the wife. It's a great scene because it's exasperation filled with confusion as he's gaslit over what is and what isn't. Whereas with Ryan Reynolds, he has a mild freak out, goes to his friend, and his friend gives some emotional speech about, existence and what does it mean, and then he just kind of repairs himself. And this comes down to what I think the biggest problem with the movie was. The spectacle and theatrics. It felt like another Hollywood emotional grab where they wanted to tug at your heartstrings for what they needed. Now, I might not be, prefer that, but I'm not against it necessarily. But if you're going to do a whole Hollywood heartstring grab, at least try to set up the sequences to be somewhat consistent. Because what ends up happening here is you just see Ryan basically get the girl, not get the girl, goes back to Keys, they get their end all be all kiss, Buddy lives, they get through it, the big sacrifice, the run down the bridge, go, blue shirt guy, go, with the whole world focusing on this. And when you think about what is at stake here, you kind of realize how silly it is. Granted, Free City was the biggest game in that universe, but we're talking about like random niggas in China were watching the TV waiting for blue shirt guy to get to the end. Like who gives a fuck? Like there are a ton of people who wouldn't have given a goddamn shit, but it seemed like the movie was placing so much hesitance on this. I don't know if it's just because I've gotten old and jaded and maybe I'm just like numb to these kind of stories, but the over fixation on like love and friendship, and even Keys' friend at the end only backed him literally at the end all of the story. It would have been better to watch him backing him throughout, maybe trying to understand what it is about gaming and the gaming world that is so important to Keys that he wouldn't take a higher level position as a programmer. Which also brings the idea, why did Keys sell it? Now again, I missed the beginning, so maybe I'm just ignorant on this, but this confuses me. Why would he sell if he cared about developing the code, why sell it? If he cared about money, why not take the programmer position? It's like either way, it doesn't seem like he was getting what he wanted. And again, it just felt like the movie was setting up conflict that needed to be set up. And again, as far as I think the major shame is because the movie was focusing on both of these plots simultaneously with very little Leon to go through, we didn't get benefits of either. I do think a movie exploring how game designers interact with the industry would have been a great movie in and of itself, because you could get to see the play of characters, the difficulty, what it means to construct a game. It may be a tad bit boring for Hollywood, but I could definitely see it working, right? And we could have had a good NPC movie where you could have seen Ryan Reynolds interacting with the PCs, trying to get them to do more. Off the top of my head, I can think of multiple ways they could have done this. They could have had an NPC uprising as the NPCs maybe tried to take control from the players in the game. They could have gone with a VR setup. It would have been a bit traditional, but at least it would have shown the difficulty in maybe characters trying to get in and out of the game. They could have gone with a conformity. Maybe the NPCs can do what they want, but they do stay in place so that people can have fun, and maybe Ryan learns that. There was many ways they could have gone down this NPC route, but they choose to just sort of go down the typical AI learn to love and exist kind of thing. But also the ramifications are a lot higher than normal life. What makes life valuable to most people is the fact that it ends, right? Because those make your decisions matter. As far as we're aware, reincarnation or rebooting are not necessarily a thing unless you do it and something happens. Otherwise, every funeral has been a waste of time. As a result, all our decisions have a high impact behind them. Where we go, who we talk to, what we eat, they all seem to impact our lives in some capacity or another. But for the NPCs of the universe, even if they're given free will, it doesn't mean much. When they die, they get reset. When they move, they get to move on. It's like, unless somehow death has been programmed into their game, which again was meaningless since they brought Buddy back, right? It's sort of dumb. They can't age, they can't grow, they can't die, they can't do anything. So realistically, none of their decisions really matter, and they're still back at stage one. Now they just have less players trying to kill them, which is like, okay, big fucking whoop. So yeah, the movie overall, I would say, was a grand disappointment. And, and I've not said that a lot about a lot of films. I didn't like Suicide Squad, but I could still see elements of it that were entertaining and interesting, even if I thought the structure was bad. Whereas here, it's like, I don't see much redeeming value to what they were trying to produce. Ryan Reynolds was not a, good fit for this cast, and thus I think a big budget was wasted on him when it could have been almost any decent actor, in my opinion. It's like, you didn't need Ryan Reynolds for that role specifically to work. The merging of two completely separate plots that just didn't seem to cohabitate with each other was, already nonsensical. And the excess staff, let's call them the excess cast, while good actors, had shit interactions and shit dialogue. It's my hope that this concept gets explored again, because I do like Truman Show-esque things, and I feel like we've had a lot of discussion about the whole concept of what if your reality was virtual. If we could explore that with NPCs, what it would be like to actually realize you are in a loop and a cycle and then you can't escape, I think that could make for interesting theatre, but who knows. Well, that's my review. Overall, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. Hey guys, please subscribe to the channel if you found it interesting, and yeah, thanks for listening. Goodbye.